The moment Delia Harper felt the scalding water splash across her already raw hands, she knew her stepmother had done it on purpose. It was October 1878 in Abiquiu, New Mexico, and the autumn sun had barely crested the horizon when Constance had ordered her to scrub every floor in the sprawling ranch house on her hands and knees. The torn fabric that passed for Delia's dress clung to her thin frame, patched so many times with mismatched cloth that the original blue calico was barely visible anymore. Her father had been dead for 2 years, and in that time, Constance had transformed from the charming widow who had swept into their lives to a woman whose cruelty knew no bounds. Delia bit back a cry as the hot water burned her skin, refusing to give Constance the satisfaction of hearing her pain. Through the kitchen window, she could see her 2 stepsisters, Marguerite and Pauline, riding past on their fine horses, their new riding habits pristine and fashionable. They were heading into town for the harvest dance that evening, the one event Delia had dreamed about attending for months. But dreams were dangerous things for girls who wore rags and slept in the storage room off the kitchen. Her father, Thomas Harper, had owned one of the most prosperous cattle ranches in the territory before his sudden death from pneumonia. He had loved Delia fiercely, her mother having died when she was only 7 years old. For 5 years, it had been just the 2 of them, and those had been the happiest years of Delia's life. Then Constance arrived in Abiquiu with her 2 daughters, a widow from St. Louis with sad eyes and a convincing story about needing a fresh start. Thomas had fallen hard and fast, marrying her within 6 months. He died less than a year later, and Delia often wondered if her stepmother had somehow hastened his death, though she had no proof. The lawyer had read the will in Constance's parlor, and Delia remembered every word. Her father had left everything to his beloved daughter Delia, to be held in trust until her 21st birthday, with Constance as the administrator. But Constance had twisted that trust into something unrecognizable. She claimed the ranch was struggling, that every penny had to be carefully managed, even as she bought her daughters new dresses and jewelry. Delia was now 19, with 2 more years until she could claim her inheritance, if there was anything left to claim. The sound of boots on the wooden porch made Delia look up from her scrubbing. Through the window, she saw a tall figure approaching the main entrance. The ranch hands rarely came to the front door, which meant this was either a buyer or someone looking for work. She heard Constance's sharp voice greeting whoever it was, followed by the deeper rumble of a man's response. Curiosity got the better of her, and she crept closer to the doorway, staying hidden in the shadows. The man standing in the entrance hall was unlike any cowboy Delia had seen around Abiquiu. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and the kind of confident posture that came from a man comfortable in his own skin. His dark hair was slightly too long, touching the collar of his well-worn but clean shirt, and his face was tanned from long hours in the sun. He held his hat in his hands, and even from where she hid, Delia could see the intelligence in his brown eyes as he spoke with Constance. "Madam, I heard in town that you might be looking for someone to handle your cattle drive to Santa Fe," he said, his voice carrying a slight Texas drawl. "Name is Wade Thompson. I have experience with herds twice the size of what I hear you are running, and I can get your cattle to market before the prices drop for the season." Constance's calculating gaze swept over Wade Thompson from head to toe. Delia knew that look. Her stepmother was weighing profit against cost, trying to determine if this man could be exploited. "The position pays $50 for the drive, Mr. Thompson. That is my final offer. The going rate is $75, madam, and that is for someone with less experience than I have." Wade's tone was respectful but firm. "I just brought a herd up from El Paso without losing a single head. I can provide references." The negotiation continued for several minutes, and Delia found herself impressed by how Wade held his ground without being disrespectful. Eventually, they settled on $65, and Constance agreed to let him stay in the bunkhouse with the other ranch hands until the drive began in 2 weeks. As Wade turned to leave, his eyes swept across the room and landed directly on Delia's hiding spot. For a brief moment, their gazes locked, and she saw something flicker in his expression that she could not quite name. Then Constance's sharp voice broke the moment. "Delia, what are you doing lurking about? Those floors will not scrub themselves, and the chicken coop needs mucking out before noon." Delia fled back to the kitchen, her heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with fear of Constance's wrath. She plunged her hands back into the now lukewarm water and tried to focus on her work, but the image of Wade Thompson's face kept intruding on her thoughts. There had been something in his eyes when he looked at her, something that might have been sympathy or perhaps surprise. Most people in Abiquiu had grown accustomed to seeing Thomas Harper's daughter reduced to a servant in her own home, but Wade Thompson was new to town. He did not know that the girl in rags scrubbing floors had once been the cherished daughter of one of the territory's most respected ranchers. The next few days passed in the usual grinding routine of endless chores and Constance's cutting remarks. Delia rose before dawn to start the cooking fires, spent her days washing, mending, cooking, and cleaning, and fell into her narrow cot long after the rest of the household had gone to bed. The only difference was that now, when she carried meals out to the ranch hands, she would occasionally catch glimpses of Wade Thompson working with the cattle or repairing fence lines. He was clearly a man who believed in earning his pay. While some of the other hands would take long breaks in the shade, Wade worked steadily through the heat of the day. She noticed how the other men seemed to respect him, often asking his opinion on various tasks. He had a quiet authority about him that had nothing to do with arrogance and everything to do with competence. On the 3rd day after his arrival, Delia was hanging laundry on the line behind the house when she heard a commotion from the corral. One of the young horses, a spirited paint that her father had been training before his death, had gotten loose and was causing chaos among the other animals. The ranch hands were shouting and trying to corner the frightened horse, but their aggressive approach was only making things worse. Wade Thompson walked into the middle of the chaos with the calm demeanor of a man who had dealt with spooked horses 1,000 times before. He raised one hand, signaling the other men to back off and be quiet. Then he simply stood there, not moving, letting the paint horse settle. Delia watched, fascinated, as Wade began to approach the animal with slow, deliberate movements, speaking in a low, soothing voice she could not quite make out from where she stood. Within 10 minutes, he had a rope around the horse's neck and was leading it back to its stall as if nothing had happened. That evening, when Delia brought dinner out to the bunkhouse, Wade was sitting on the porch, cleaning his saddle. The other men had already gone inside, leaving him alone in the fading light. She set the heavy pot down on the table by the door, trying not to meet his eyes, but his voice stopped her before she could hurry away. "That was your father's horse, was it not?" Delia froze, surprised that he knew anything about her father. Slowly, she turned to face him. "Yes, sir. Papa called him Thunder because of the white lightning mark on his shoulder. He was training him before he got sick." Wade nodded, his hands never stopping their steady work on the leather. "Your father had a good reputation as a horseman. I heard about him even down in Texas. People said Thomas Harper never met a horse he could not gentle." Something in Delia's chest tightened at hearing her father spoken of with such respect. It had been so long since anyone had mentioned him to her, and certainly never with admiration. "He was the best," she said quietly. "He taught me to ride when I was 5 years old, said a rancher's daughter needed to know her way around horses as well as any son would. Sounds like a wise man." Wade looked up at her then, really looked at her, and Delia felt suddenly self-conscious about her ragged dress and the kerchief covering her hair. "What happened to you, Miss Harper?" The question was asked gently, but it struck her like a physical blow. No one had asked her that in 2 years. No one in Abiquiu seemed to care what had happened to Thomas Harper's daughter. They had all watched as Constance systematically stripped away her dignity, her possessions, and her future, and no one had said a word. "My stepmother happened," Delia said, the bitterness creeping into her voice despite her best efforts. "But I should not speak of it. If she hears that I have been complaining, there will be consequences." "That woman is your stepmother." Wade's expression darkened. "I assumed you were hired help, given how she speaks to you." "I might as well be." Delia glanced nervously toward the house, afraid that Constance might somehow hear this conversation. "I should go. Thank you for catching thunder. My father would have been grateful." She hurried away before Wade could ask any more questions, her heart racing. It had been dangerous to speak so openly, even for those few moments. Constance had ways of finding out about things, and Delia could not afford to have her stepmother's suspicions aroused. Still, as she lay in her narrow cot that night, she could not stop thinking about the concern she had seen in Wade Thompson's eyes. It had been so long since anyone had looked at her with anything other than pity or indifference that she had almost forgotten what kindness looked like. The following Sunday, Constance announced that she and her daughters would be traveling to Santa Fe for a week to visit Constance's sister. This was not unusual. Constance often took trips that conveniently left Delia alone to manage the entire household. What was unusual was the list of tasks Constance left behind. It was twice as long as normal, clearly designed to ensure that Delia had no time to rest during their absence. "I expect all of this to be completed by the time we return," Constance said, her cold blue eyes boring into Delia. "If even one item is left undone, you will regret it. Do you understand?" "Yes, madam," Delia said, keeping her voice carefully neutral. She watched from the porch as Constance and her daughters departed in the carriage, their trunks full of fine clothes and traveling necessities. Marguerite and Pauline did not even glance in her direction as they left. To them, Delia had become invisible, nothing more than part of the household furniture. Once the carriage disappeared down the dusty road, Delia allowed herself a moment of relief. A week without Constance's constant criticism and surveillance felt like a gift, even if it came with an impossible workload. She set about her tasks with determined efficiency, starting with the mountain of mending that had accumulated. The ranch hands would need their work shirts repaired, and several of the household linens had tears that needed patching. She had set up her sewing in the kitchen where the light was best when she heard a knock at the back door. Opening it, she found Wade Thompson standing there with his hat in his hands, looking somewhat uncertain. "Begging your pardon, Miss Harper, but I was wondering if you might have a needle and thread I could borrow. I have torn my only good shirt, and I am not much skilled with a needle." Delia hesitated. It would be improper for her to be alone in the house with one of the ranch hands, even though technically she was supposed to be available to assist them with such needs. But Constance was gone, and something about Wade Thompson made her feel safe in a way she had not felt in a long time. "I can mend it for you if you would like," she offered. "I am already working on mending for the other men." "I would not want to add to your burden," Wade said, but he was already reaching into the bundle he carried and pulling out a dark blue shirt. "But I confess I would be grateful. I am liable to sew my fingers to the fabric if I try it myself." Delia took the shirt and examined the tear. It was a clean rip along one of the seams, easily repaired. As she threaded her needle, Wade lingered in the doorway rather than leaving as she had expected. "May I ask you something, Miss Harper?" She looked up, surprised by the serious tone in his voice. "Of course." "Why do you let her treat you that way? This is your ranch, is it not? Your father left it to you." Delia's hands stilled on the fabric. "How do you know that?" I asked around in town. "People talk freely to strangers, and I was curious after meeting you." Wade stepped fully into the kitchen, closing the door behind him. "They told me that Thomas Harper left everything to his daughter, but that his widow controls the trust until the girl turns 21. That is you, is it not?" "Yes." Delia set down the shirt, her hands trembling slightly. "But knowing that I will inherit eventually and actually being able to claim what is mine are two different things. Constance controls everything. She gives me barely enough food to survive, and these rags are all I have to wear. If I complain to the lawyer in town, she has threatened to have me declared unfit and commit me to an asylum in Santa Fe. She says no one would believe that a woman in her right mind would allow herself to be treated this way, so clearly I must be mad." Wade's jaw tightened. "That is a vicious threat. It is an effective one." Delia picked up the shirt again, needing something to do with her hands. "I have only 2 more years until I turn 21. I can survive 2 more years. But should you have to?" Wade moved closer, pulling out a chair and sitting across the table from her. "Miss Harper, there are laws. You could go to the territorial court in Santa Fe. You could fight this. With what money? What lawyer would take my case? And even if I found one, Constance has spent the last 2 years carefully building a reputation as the devoted stepmother burdened with an ungrateful, possibly unstable stepdaughter." Delia's voice cracked despite her best efforts to remain composed. "I have thought through every option, Mr. Thompson. This is the only way." They sat in silence for a few moments, the only sound the whisper of thread through fabric as Delia worked on his shirt. Finally, Wade spoke again, his voice gentler this time. "Will you tell me about your father?" The question surprised her, but in a good way. Delia found herself smiling as memories surfaced. "He was the kindest man I ever knew, strong and tough when he needed to be, but never cruel. He loved this ranch, loved the land and the animals and the work. After my mother died, he made sure I never felt alone. He taught me everything about running a ranch, said it would all be mine someday and I needed to know how to manage it properly. He sounds like a good father. He was the best." Delia finished the repair and held up the shirt, examining her work in the light. "There. Good as new." Wade took the shirt from her, his fingers briefly brushing against hers. The contact was fleeting but sent a strange warmth through her. "Thank you, Miss Harper. You do fine work." "Delia," she said impulsively. "You can call me Delia. I think we have moved past formalities, Mr. Thompson. Only if you call me Wade." He smiled at her, a genuine smile that reached his eyes and made him look younger. "And I want you to know, Delia, that if you ever need help with anything while I am here, you only have to ask." After Wade left, Delia returned to her work with a lightness in her chest that had not been there before. It was dangerous to let herself feel hope, dangerous to trust anyone, but something about Wade Thompson made her want to take that risk. He treated her like a person worthy of respect, like the daughter of a rancher rather than a servant in rags. That simple kindness meant more to her than he could possibly know. Over the next few days, Delia found herself looking forward to the times when she would see Wade around the ranch. He had a way of appearing whenever she was struggling with a particularly heavy chore, offering help without making her feel weak or incapable. When she was trying to carry a large basket of wet laundry, he took it from her and hung the clothes on the line himself, joking about how his mother had made sure all her sons knew how to do basic household tasks. When the kitchen pump broke, he spent an entire evening fixing it, refusing to leave until water flowed freely again. They talked during these moments, sharing bits of their lives. Wade told her about growing up on a ranch in Texas with 4 brothers, learning to ride and rope almost before he could walk. He spoke of the restlessness that had driven him to leave home at 18, to see more of the territory and make his own way in the world. He had worked on ranches from Texas to Colorado, building a reputation as a skilled cattleman and an honest worker. In turn, Delia found herself opening up about her childhood, about the happy years with her father and the devastating grief of losing him. She talked about her mother, too, the memories faded but still precious, of a woman who had loved to sing while she worked and who had filled their home with flowers and laughter. On the 5th day of Constance's absence, Delia woke to discover that one of the milk cows had gotten into the grain shed during the night and eaten herself sick. The ranch foreman told her that the cow would probably die if they could not get her on her feet and moving. Delia had helped her father with sick animals before, and she knew what needed to be done, but the foreman and the other hands seemed reluctant to take orders from her. Wade had no such hesitation. When Delia explained what needed to happen, he immediately began organizing the men. "You heard Miss Harper. We need to get this cow up and keep her walking until the bloat passes. Let us move." The authority in his voice got the men moving, and for the next several hours, Delia and Wade worked side by side to save the cow. It was exhausting, dirty work, but eventually the animal recovered enough to be led back to the pasture. As they watched the cow rejoin the herd, Wade turned to Delia with an approving nod. "You know what you are doing. Your father taught you well." "I used to help him with everything," Delia said, aware of how filthy she was, her ragged dress covered in mud and worse. "Before Constance came, I was his right hand. I loved it. You should be running this ranch, not scrubbing floors. In 2 years I will be. If there is anything left to run by then." Delia's frustration leaked into her voice. "I know Constance is selling off cattle and pocketing the money. I know she has let go of the good ranch hands and hired cheaper help. She is bleeding this place dry, and there is nothing I can do to stop it." Wade was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "What if there was something you could do?" "Like what?" "Come to Santa Fe with me when I take the cattle drive. Talk to a lawyer there, someone who is not under your stepmother's influence. At least find out what your options really are." Delia shook her head. "I cannot leave the ranch. If I am not here when Constance returns, she will have even more ammunition to use against me. She will say I abandoned my responsibilities, that I am unfit. Then what if someone else went for you? What if I talked to a lawyer and explained the situation?" The offer caught Delia off guard. "Why would you do that for me? You barely know me." Wade turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "Because what is being done to you is wrong, and I cannot stand by and watch it happen. Because I have known you for less than a week, and already I can see that you are brave and strong and deserving of so much better than rags and cruelty. And because I want to help, if you will let me." Something in Delia's heart cracked open at his words. She had been alone for so long, fighting this battle by herself, that she had forgotten what it felt like to have someone on her side. Tears stung her eyes and she blinked them back furiously, not wanting to cry in front of him. "I would be grateful," she managed to say. "More grateful than I can express. Then it is settled. I will make some inquiries when I get to Santa Fe, but Delia, you need to promise me something." "What?" "Promise me that if things get worse, If your stepmother hurts you or threatens you in any real way, you will leave this place. Come find me or go to the sheriff, but do not stay here and let her destroy you." "I promise," Delia said, even though she was not sure she could keep that promise. This ranch was all she had left of her father, and the thought of abandoning it, even temporarily, felt like betrayal. Constance and her daughters returned 2 days later, their carriage loaded with packages and new purchases. Delia had managed to complete most of the tasks on the impossible list, though she had not slept more than a few hours each night to do it. She stood on the porch as they arrived, waiting for the inspection she knew was coming. Constance swept through the house with a critical eye, examining every corner for dust or disorder. Marguerite and Pauline trailed behind her, making catty remarks about the faded curtains and worn furniture. Delia followed silently, her hands clasped in front of her, waiting for the inevitable complaints. "The silver is not polished to my standards," Constance announced, running one gloved finger along the tea service. "You will redo it tonight." "Yes, madam, and the garden is overgrown." "You will spend tomorrow weeding." "Yes, madam." The list of criticisms continued, each one delivered in Constance's cold, precise voice. Finally, when she had exhausted her complaints about the house, Constance turned her attention to Delia herself. "You look even more ragged than usual. I suppose you expect me to provide you with new clothing." "No, madam." "Good, because this household cannot afford such luxuries, not with how poorly the ranch has been performing." Constance's eyes narrowed. "I noticed we have a new man working here, this Wade Thompson. I trust you have not been bothering him with your presence." Delia kept her face carefully blank. "I have only seen him when bringing meals to the ranch hands, madam. See that it stays that way. I do not need you embarrassing this family by throwing yourself at the hired help. You may think you are still a rancher's daughter, but look at yourself. You are nothing but a servant, and not a particularly good one at that." The words stung, as they were meant to, but Delia had heard worse over the past 2 years. She simply nodded and excused herself to begin the evening chores. As she worked in the kitchen, preparing supper, she heard Marguerite and Pauline giggling in the parlor about the young men they had met in Santa Fe, about the dances they had attended, and the attention they had received. Once, Delia had dreamed of such things. Now, those dreams felt like they belonged to someone else entirely. The cattle drive was scheduled to begin in 3 days, and Delia found herself torn between hope and fear. Hope that Wade would find a lawyer in Santa Fe who could help her. Fear that Constance would somehow discover what they were planning. She tried to act normally, tried not to let her anticipation show, but she felt as if she was walking on a knife's edge. The evening before the drive was set to begin, Delia was in the kitchen washing the dinner dishes when she heard a soft knock at the back door. Opening it, she found Wade standing in the shadows, holding something wrapped in brown paper. "I need to speak with you," he said quietly. "Can you come outside for a moment?" Delia glanced nervously toward the parlor, where she could hear Constance and her daughters talking. Slipping outside, she pulled the door nearly closed behind her. "What is it?" "I want you to have this." Wade held out the package. "Do not open it now. Wait until tomorrow after we have left for the drive." "What is it?" "Just open it tomorrow, please." His voice was urgent. "And Delia, I meant what I said. I am going to find help for you in Santa Fe, I swear it." Before she could respond, before she could ask any of the 100 questions swirling in her mind, he was gone, disappearing into the darkness. Delia clutched the package to her chest and slipped back inside, her heart pounding. She hid the package under her thin mattress, afraid to even look at it until the next day, as Wade had instructed. The morning of the cattle drive, Delia rose even earlier than usual to prepare breakfast for the men. She watched from the kitchen window as they gathered the herd, as Wade gave calm, clear instructions that the other men followed without question. He had a natural leadership quality that had nothing to do with being loud or aggressive. People simply trusted him, respected him. Once the drive had departed, the ranch settling into an unusual quiet without the ranch hands, Delia finally allowed herself to retrieve the package from its hiding place. Her hands shook slightly as she unwrapped the brown paper, and when she saw what was inside, she gasped aloud. It was a dress. Not a fancy dress like the ones Marguerite and Pauline wore, but a simple, well-made dress of deep green calico with a modest white collar and buttons up the front. Beneath the dress was a pair of new stockings and a white cotton chemise. There was also a small note in Wade's surprisingly neat handwriting. Every woman deserves to have at least one dress that is truly hers, not pieced together from rags and charity. I hope this fits. I guessed at the size based on my sister back home. Wear it if you want to or do not. But know that when I look at you, I do not see a servant in rags. I see the daughter of Thomas Harper, a woman who deserves every good thing this world has to offer. I will return in 2 weeks with news from Santa Fe. Until then, be safe. Wade. Delia sank onto her cot, clutching the dress to her chest as tears streamed down her face. She could not remember the last time someone had given her a gift, let alone something so thoughtful and generous. The dress must have cost Wade a significant portion of his wages, money he had earned through hard work. He had done this for her, a woman he barely knew, asking nothing in return. She wanted to put the dress on immediately, to feel the new fabric against her skin, to see herself as something other than a girl in rags. But fear held her back. What would Constance do if she saw Delia in a new dress? She would demand to know where it came from, and if she learned that Wade had given it to her, there would be consequences for both of them. Carefully, reverently, Delia refolded the dress and hid it in the bottom of her trunk, the one place in her small room that locked. She would keep it safe, this precious gift, and perhaps someday she would have the chance to wear it. For now, it was enough to know that it was there, that someone thought she deserved beautiful things. The 2 weeks of the cattle drive passed with agonizing slowness. Delia threw herself into her work, trying not to count the days, trying not to let herself hope too much. Constance was in a foul mood for reasons Delia did not understand, which meant the criticisms were even sharper than usual. Marguerite and Pauline complained constantly about the lack of entertainment in Abiquiu, about how they wanted to return to Santa Fe or perhaps travel even farther east. On the 14th day after the drive had departed, Delia was hanging laundry when she heard the sound of horses and cattle in the distance. Her heart leaped into her throat. They were back. Wade was back. She forced herself to finish hanging the clothes, forced herself not to run toward the sound, not to give Constance any reason to be suspicious. That evening, when she brought supper out to the bunkhouse, Wade was there with the other men, tired and dusty from the long drive. Their eyes met across the room and she saw the slight nod he gave her. He had news. She set the food down and turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Miss Harper, might I have a word with you outside? I have a message from town that I need to deliver." It was a thin excuse, but no one seemed to think anything of it. Delia followed Wade out onto the porch, her pulse racing. Once they were alone, he pulled a folded letter from his jacket pocket. "I found a lawyer in Santa Fe, a man named Richard Thornton. He is honest and has experience with inheritance cases. I explained your situation to him, and he wrote this letter for you." Delia took the letter with trembling hands and unfolded it, reading by the last light of the setting sun. The letter was professional and direct. Mr. Thornton stated that based on what Wade had told him, Delia had grounds to petition the territorial court for an early release of her inheritance. The fact that Constance was actively depleting the estate while providing inadequate care for the beneficiary was grounds for removing her as trustee. He offered to take the case for a small retainer, with the rest of his fees to be paid from the estate once it was released to Delia. "This is real," Delia whispered. "This could actually work." "It will work," Wade said firmly. "But you need to act. The longer you wait, the more your stepmother can steal. Mr. Thornton said he could file the petition within a week if you come to Santa Fe and meet with him." "I cannot just leave. Constance would never allow it." "Then do not ask her permission." Wade stepped closer, his voice intense. "Delia, you have been living as a prisoner in your own home for 2 years. That has to end. Come to Santa Fe with me. I am heading there in 2 days to deliver some horses to a buyer. You can ride with me, meet with Mr. Thornton, and file the petition. Once the court is involved, your stepmother cannot touch you without facing serious consequences." Everything in Delia wanted to say yes, wanted to grab onto this chance with both hands. But fear held her back, fear that had been beaten into her over months of cruelty and threats. What if it does not work? What if she convinces the judge that I am unfit? Then you will be no worse off than you are now. But Delia, I do not believe that will happen. I talked to people in Santa Fe, people who knew your father. He was respected, and people remember you as a smart, capable girl. Your stepmother's story does not hold water when people actually think about it. Wade took her hand, his calloused fingers warm around hers. You have to fight for what is yours, and I will be there to help you every step of the way. Delia looked down at their joined hands, at the contrast between his sun-browned skin and her paler fingers, reddened from harsh soap and constant work. Something inside her, something that had been dormant for 2 years, stirred to life. It was not just hope, it was determination. "I will do it," she said. "I will go with you to Santa Fe." The next 2 days were an exercise in pretending everything was normal while Delia secretly prepared for her escape. She could not take much with her, could not risk Constance noticing anything missing. The dress Wade had given her was carefully rolled and hidden in a basket that she planned to carry with her, along with a few other essentials. She also retrieved a small wooden box from its hiding place in the barn, a box that contained her mother's wedding ring and a few gold coins her father had given her years ago. She had hidden it when Constance first started taking her possessions, and thankfully, it had never been discovered. On the morning of her planned departure, Delia rose before dawn as usual and went through her normal routine. She started the fires, began preparing breakfast, and waited until she heard Constance and her daughters stirring upstairs. Then, with her heart threatening to beat out of her chest, she slipped out the back door with her basket and hurried toward the barn where Wade had told her to meet him. He was already there, saddling 2 horses in the pre-dawn darkness. When he saw her, his face broke into a relieved smile. "I was worried you might change your mind. I almost did, about a dozen times." Delia set down her basket and looked at the horses. "I have not ridden in 2 years. Constance forbade it after the first month. It will come back to you. Your father taught you well, remember." Wade finished with the saddles and turned to her. "We need to leave now, before anyone realizes you are gone. We can make good time if we ride hard, and we should reach Santa Fe by tomorrow evening." Delia nodded, her mouth too dry for words. Wade helped her mount, and the feeling of being on horseback again was both strange and familiar. She had forgotten how much she loved it, the sense of freedom and possibility that came with having a horse beneath her. They left the ranch at a steady trot, not so fast as to be suspicious if anyone saw them, but fast enough to put distance between Delia and her prison. As the sun rose behind them, painting the New Mexico sky in shades of gold and pink, Delia felt something shift inside her. She was taking control of her life again. She was fighting back. They rode in companionable silence for the first hour, both of them focused on the road ahead. Wade led 2 additional horses on a lead rope, the ones he was delivering to his buyer in Santa Fe. As the morning warmed, Delia found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the ride, her body remembering skills her father had taught her years ago. Around mid-morning, Wade called for a rest at a small creek. They watered the horses and Delia drank deeply from her canteen, suddenly aware of how thirsty she was. Wade pulled some bread and cheese from his saddlebag and divided it between them. "I have been thinking," he said as they ate. "Once this is over, once you have your ranch back, what will you do?" "Run it properly, the way my father would have wanted." Delia took a bite of bread, savoring the simple food. "I will hire back the good ranch hands that Constance let go. I will rebuild the herd. I will make it what it once was." "That sounds like a lot of work for one person." "I am not afraid of hard work." "I know you are not." Wade's gaze was steady on her face. "But everyone needs help sometimes. Everyone needs people they can trust." There was something in his tone that made Delia's pulse quicken. "What are you saying, Wade?" "I am saying that I would like to stay in Abiquiu. I would like to help you rebuild your ranch, if you would have me. I can work for wages like any other hand, but Delia, I want you to know that my interest in helping you is not purely professional." Delia set down her bread, her hands suddenly unsteady. "What do you mean?" Wade moved closer, kneeling in front of where she sat on a fallen log. "I mean that from the moment I saw you in that house, wearing rags but carrying yourself with the dignity of a queen, I have not been able to stop thinking about you. These past 2 weeks in Santa Fe, I should have been focused on the cattle, but instead I was thinking about you, about your courage, about your strength, about how much I want to be the kind of man who deserves to stand beside you, Wade." His name came out as barely a whisper. "I know this is fast. I know we have known each other less than a month. But Delia, I also know that what I feel for you is real. And I hope, that maybe you feel something for me too." Delia's eyes stung with tears, but these were not tears of sadness or despair. These were tears of joy, of overwhelming emotion. "I do," she said. "I do feel something for you. I have been afraid to admit it, even to myself, because I have lost so much already. But Wade, you make me feel like myself again. Like the person I was before Constance, before all of this. You see me, really see me, and that means more than I can say." Wade reached up and gently wiped away the tears on her cheeks. "Then let me keep seeing you. Let me stand with you while you reclaim your life. And when the dust settles, when your ranch is yours again and you are free, let me court you properly. Let me show you all the ways I plan to love you." The word love hung in the air between them, precious and terrifying and perfect. Delia leaned forward and rested her forehead against Wade's, breathing in the scent of leather and horses and the unique smell that was just him. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." They stayed like that for a long moment, the world narrowing to just the 2 of them beside the creek. Then Wade pulled back, a soft smile on his face. "We should keep moving. I want to get you to Santa Fe as quickly as possible, get this legal process started." The rest of the journey passed in a blur of landscapes and conversation. Wade told her more about his childhood, about his brothers and the ranch where he had grown up. Delia shared memories of her father, stories that she had not told anyone in years. With each mile, each story, the connection between them deepened. By the time they stopped to make camp that evening, Delia felt as if she had known Wade her entire life. Wade built a small fire, and they ate more of the simple provisions he had brought. As darkness fell and the stars emerged in the vast New Mexico sky, Delia found herself unable to stop stealing glances at the man across the fire from her. He was handsome, certainly, but it was more than that. It was the way he moved with such confidence, the way he listened when she spoke, the way he treated her as an equal worthy of respect. "You should try to sleep," Wade said, spreading out his bedroll for her. "We have another long day of riding tomorrow. Where will you sleep?" "I will take first watch, then sleep by the fire. Do not worry about me." He helped her settle into the bedroll, then draped his coat over her as an extra blanket. "Sleep well, Delia." She wanted to protest, wanted to insist that he take the bedroll, but exhaustion was pulling at her. The physical exertion of the ride, combined with the emotional intensity of the day, had drained her completely. She fell asleep to the sound of Wade's soft humming and the crackle of the fire. They reached Santa Fe late the following afternoon, the adobe buildings glowing golden in the slanting sunlight. Delia had been to Santa Fe only a handful of times in her life, always with her father, and the city seemed both familiar and strange. Wade led them directly to a modest hotel near the plaza. "We need to get you a room where you can clean up and rest," he said. "Then tomorrow morning we will go see Mr. Thornton." At the hotel desk, the clerk looked at Delia's ragged dress with barely concealed disdain. "We do not rent rooms to beggars," he said coldly. Wade's expression hardened. "The lady is not a beggar. She is Miss Delia Harper, daughter of the late Thomas Harper of Abiquiu, and you will treat her with the respect she deserves. Now, we need 2 rooms, and if you cannot provide them, I am certain the hotel across the plaza will be happy to take our money." The clerk's attitude changed immediately at the mention of Thomas Harper's name. "Of course, sir. My apologies. 2 rooms. And will the lady be requiring anything else?" "A bath, perhaps." "Yes," Wade said firmly. "A hot bath brought to her room and some supper as well." Once they were upstairs and the clerk had left, Wade turned to Delia. "I am in the room right next door. If you need anything at all, just knock on the wall." "Thank you, Wade." "For everything." He smiled at her, that warm smile that made her heart skip. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we start fighting back." The hot bath was heaven, and Delia spent a long time soaking, washing away the grime of travel and 2 years of misery. Afterward, she finally put on the beautiful green dress Wade had given her. It fit perfectly, hugging her thin frame in a way that made her look like a woman again rather than a ragged servant. She brushed out her long hair, which was several shades lighter now that it was clean, and for the first time in years, she looked in the mirror and recognized the person staring back at her. The next morning, Wade knocked on her door bright and early. When she opened it, his eyes widened and he stood there for a moment, just looking at her. "You look beautiful," he said simply. Delia blushed. "It is the dress. You chose well." "It is not the dress, but I am glad you are wearing it." He offered her his arm. "Ready to meet Mr. Thornton." The lawyer's office was in a well-maintained building near the courthouse. Richard Thornton turned out to be a dignified man in his 50s with silver hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. He greeted Wade warmly and then turned his full attention to Delia. "Miss Harper, I am very glad to meet you. Mr. Thompson here has told me much about your situation, and I believe we have a strong case. Please, sit down and tell me everything in your own words." For the next hour, Delia recounted her story. She told Mr. Thornton about her father's death, about how Constance had slowly isolated her and stripped away her possessions and dignity. She described the conditions she had been living in, the threats Constance had made, the way the ranch was being mismanaged and depleted. Wade sat beside her the entire time, his presence a steady source of support. When she finished, Mr. Thornton leaned back in his chair, his expression grave. "What has been done to you is unconscionable, Miss Harper. It is also, I am pleased to say, illegal. A trustee has a fiduciary duty to act in the best interests of the beneficiary. From what you have described, Mrs. Constance Harper has done the exact opposite. She has enriched herself and her daughters at your expense while actively harming both you and the estate. So you can help me?" Delia asked, hardly daring to hope. "I can and I will. I will file an emergency petition with the territorial court tomorrow morning. Given the severity of the situation, I am confident we can get a hearing within the week. In the meantime, I strongly advise you not to return to the ranch." "Do you have somewhere safe to stay?" "She will stay at the hotel," Wade said immediately. "I will make sure she is safe." Mr. Thornton nodded approvingly. "Good. Miss Harper, I need you to prepare yourself. The hearing will not be pleasant. Mrs. Harper will undoubtedly fight this, and she may say terrible things about you, but I need you to stay strong and tell the truth. Can you do that?" "I can," Delia said, lifting her chin. "I have survived 2 years of her cruelty. I can survive a court hearing." The next few days were a strange mixture of anxiety and freedom. Delia stayed at the hotel while Mr. Thornton prepared the case. Wade found odd jobs around Santa Fe to keep himself occupied and earn some money, but he checked on Delia multiple times every day. In the evenings, they would have dinner together in the hotel dining room, talking about everything and nothing. On the third evening, Wade asked her to take a walk with him through the plaza. The evening air was cool and pleasant, and the plaza was full of people going about their business. They walked in comfortable silence for a while before Wade spoke. "I have been thinking about the future," he said, "about what happens after the court case." "So have I," Delia admitted. "I am terrified that the judge will not believe me, that I will have to go back there." "That is not going to happen. Mr. Thornton is confident, and so am I." Wade stopped walking and turned to face her. "But Delia, even when you win, even when the ranch is yours, you need to understand something. You will be a young, unmarried woman running a large property. There will be men who try to take advantage of that. There will be challenges and obstacles. I know, but I am not afraid of hard work or challenges. I know you are not." Wade reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "Which is why I want to make sure you have someone by your side who will never try to take advantage of you. Someone who will stand with you as an equal partner." Delia's breath caught as Wade opened the box, revealing a simple gold ring with a small, beautiful turquoise stone. "Wade, what are you doing?" "I am asking you to marry me," he said quietly. "I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a few weeks. But Delia, I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I love your strength and your courage. I love the way you have survived things that would have broken most people. I love the dreams you have for your ranch and your future. And I want to be part of that future if you will have me." Tears were streaming down Delia's face again, but she was smiling through them. "Are you certain?" "I come with so much trouble, a legal battle, a ranch to rebuild, a stepmother who hates me. I have never been more certain of anything." Wade took the ring from the box and held it up. "This belonged to my mother. She gave it to me before I left Texas, told me to save it for the woman I could not imagine living without. That is you, Delia. You are the woman I cannot imagine living without, so please say yes, marry me." "Yes," Delia whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." Wade slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit as if it had been made for her. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her, gentle and sweet and full of promise. Delia wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back, pouring all of her hope and love and gratitude into that kiss. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "I love you," Delia said, testing out the words. They felt right, felt true. "I love you, Wade Thompson, and I love you, Delia Harper. Soon to be Delia Thompson, if you will take my name." "I will," proudly. They walked back to the hotel hand in hand, and for the first time in 2 years, Delia felt completely happy. She had found not just an escape from her stepmother's cruelty, but a partner who loved her and believed in her. Whatever happened at the court hearing, she knew she would face it with Wade by her side. The hearing was scheduled for the following Monday morning. Delia wore her green dress and the turquoise ring, drawing strength from both. Wade accompanied her to the courthouse, along with Mr. Thornton. As they entered the building, Delia saw Constance waiting with her own lawyer, a thin man with a calculating expression. Constance's face when she saw Delia was a mixture of shock and fury. "What are you doing here?" Constance hissed as they passed. "And where did you get that dress?" "She is here to reclaim what is rightfully hers," Wade said firmly, placing himself between Delia and her stepmother. "And I suggest you save your questions for the judge." The hearing room was smaller than Delia had expected, with dark wood paneling and rows of benches. The judge, a stern-looking man named Judge Martinez, entered and everyone rose. Once the formalities were completed, Mr. Thornton began presenting Delia's case. He was methodical and thorough, laying out the terms of Thomas Harper's will, and then detailing how Constance had violated her duties as trustee. He presented witnesses who testified about the ranch's declining condition, about how valuable livestock and equipment had been sold off. He called the hotel clerk from Abiquiu, who reluctantly admitted that he had seen Delia multiple times over the past 2 years, always wearing rags and looking malnourished. Then, it was Delia's turn to testify. She walked to the witness stand on shaking legs, but once she began speaking, the words flowed. She told the truth, simple and direct. She described her life before her father's death and the dramatic change afterward. She talked about the rags she had been forced to wear, the inadequate food, the endless labor, the threats of being sent to an asylum. Constance's lawyer tried to trip her up during cross-examination, suggesting that she was exaggerating or lying. But Delia remained calm and consistent, her testimony backed up by the physical evidence and other witnesses. When it was Constance's turn to testify, she painted herself as a devoted stepmother, burdened with an ungrateful, difficult stepdaughter. She claimed that Delia had refused to wear the nice clothes provided to her, that she had been lazy and incompetent in her duties, that the ranch's financial troubles were due to the poor economy rather than any mismanagement. But Mr. Thornton systematically dismantled her story. He produced receipts showing expensive purchases for Marguerite and Pauline, while nothing had been bought for Delia. He showed records of cattle sales where the money had gone directly into Constance's personal accounts rather than back into the ranch. By the time he finished his cross-examination, Constance was flustered and defensive, her credibility in tatters. Judge Martinez called for a brief recess to review the evidence, and Delia waited with Wade and Mr. Thornton in a small side room. Wade held her hand the entire time, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on her palm. "You did beautifully," he told her. "You told the truth, and the judge could see that." When they were called back into the courtroom, Judge Martinez looked grave as he began to speak. "I have reviewed the evidence presented today, and I must say that I am deeply disturbed by what I have heard. Mrs. Constance Harper, you were given a position of trust and responsibility, and you have grossly abused that trust. The evidence clearly shows that you have depleted the Harper estate for your own benefit while subjecting Miss Harper to conditions that can only be described as cruel and unusual." Constance started to protest, but the judge silenced her with a sharp look. "I am not finished." Effective immediately, you are removed as trustee of the Harper estate. All assets, properties, and accounts are to be transferred to Miss Delia Harper without delay. Furthermore, you are ordered to repay all funds that you inappropriately withdrew from the estate. A full accounting will be conducted and you will be held financially responsible. Delia felt Wade's hand tighten on hers, but she could barely process what she was hearing. It was over. She had won. "Miss Harper," the judge continued, his expression softening slightly, "I am sorry for what you have endured. Your father's trust has been restored to you, and I trust you will manage it with the wisdom and care he would have expected. This court is adjourned." As the gavel came down, Delia felt as if a massive weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Wade pulled her into a tight embrace and she buried her face in his chest, overwhelmed with relief and joy. "You did it," he murmured against her hair. "You won." Mr. Thornton approached them with a satisfied smile. "Congratulations, Miss Harper. The paperwork will take a few days to process, but the ranch is yours. I would also like to pursue criminal charges against Mrs. Harper for fraud and embezzlement, if you are willing." Delia pulled away from Wade and looked at her lawyer. "Will that keep her away from the ranch permanently?" "It would likely result in a prison sentence, yes." "Then do it. I want to make sure she can never hurt anyone else the way she hurt me." With the legal battle won, Delia and Wade returned to Abiquiu as different people than they had left. Delia wore her green dress with pride, and the turquoise ring on her finger announced her engagement to anyone who looked. Word of the court's decision had spread quickly through the territory, and people who had ignored her plight for 2 years suddenly wanted to congratulate her and offer their support. When they arrived at the ranch, Constance and her daughters were packing their belongings into a wagon, supervised by the territorial marshal. Constance's face was tight with fury, but she did not dare say anything to Delia with the marshal present. Marguerite and Pauline looked shocked and frightened, finally realizing that their comfortable life had been built on stolen money. As they drove away, the marshal tipped his hat to Delia. "Your property is secure, Miss Harper. If they try to return, you let me know immediately." "Thank you, Marshal." Once they were gone, Delia stood in front of the ranch house that had been both her home and her prison. Wade came to stand beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Strange, wonderful, terrifying." Delia turned to look at him. "I want to make changes. I want to tear down the parts of this house that remind me of her and rebuild them. I want to start fresh." "Then that is what we will do, but first, there is something I would like to ask you." "What is that?" Wade smiled at her, that warm, genuine smile that made her heart race. "How do you feel about getting married right away? Because I do not want to wait months to make you my wife. I want to start our life together now." Delia laughed, the sound bright and free in the afternoon air. "I would like that very much. How soon is right away? How about next week? We can have the ceremony here at the ranch, invite the people who actually care about you, keep it simple and honest like us." "Next week sounds perfect." They spent the next 7 days in a flurry of activity. Wade hired back the ranch hands who had been let go, good men who were thrilled to return to work for Thomas Harper's daughter. Delia went through the house, cataloging what needed to be changed and what could be kept. She found many of her old possessions hidden away in Constance's room and reclaimed them with fierce satisfaction. The local seamstress, a kind woman named Mrs. Garcia, helped Delia alter one of her mother's old dresses for the wedding. It was a beautiful cream-colored silk that had been packed away for years, and with some careful work, it fit Delia perfectly. Wade bought a new suit and looked so handsome in it that Delia could hardly believe this man was going to be her husband. The wedding took place on a sunny Saturday morning in early November. It was small and intimate, with only a handful of guests, but it was perfect. The ranch foreman stood up as Wade's best man, and Mrs. Garcia acted as Delia's witness. The local priest performed the ceremony under a cottonwood tree that Delia's father had planted years ago. When Wade slipped the simple gold wedding band onto her finger, joining the turquoise engagement ring, Delia felt her father's presence like a warm glow in her chest. He would have loved Wade, she knew. He would have been so proud of her for fighting back, for reclaiming what was hers, for choosing a partner who truly saw and valued her. "I love you," Wade said as they were pronounced husband and wife. "I will love you every day for the rest of my life." "And I love you," Delia replied, her voice strong and sure. "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. Thank you for giving me the courage to fight. You always had the courage. I just reminded you of it." Their first kiss as husband and wife was sweet and full of promise. As they turned to face their small gathering of friends and employees, Delia felt a sense of completeness that she had not known since her father's death. She was home, she was free, and she was loved. The celebration that followed was simple but joyful. Mrs. Garcia had prepared a feast, and the ranch hands provided music. Wade danced with his bride in the fading afternoon light, holding her close and whispering words of love in her ear. Delia laughed more that day than she had in 2 years combined, her happiness bubbling up and overflowing. As evening fell and the guests departed, Wade carried Delia over the threshold of the ranch house. They had spent the past week transforming the master bedroom that had belonged to her father, and later to Constance, into a space that was truly theirs. Fresh paint, new curtains, and a beautiful quilt that Mrs. Garcia had given them as a wedding present made the room feel like a sanctuary. Wade set Delia down gently, his hands lingering on her waist. "Are you happy?" he asked, his voice soft. "I am happier than I ever imagined I could be," Delia replied honestly. "A month ago, I was wearing rags and scrubbing floors with no hope of escape. Now I am standing here in my mother's wedding dress, married to the most wonderful man I have ever met, in the house that is finally mine again. It feels like a dream. It is not a dream. It is real, and it is only the beginning." Wade cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently stroking her cheeks. "We have a whole life ahead of us, Delia, a life we will build together." That night, as they lay together in the darkness, Delia marveled at how much her life had changed. Wade's arms were wrapped around her, his steady breathing a comfort against her back. She thought about the green dress that still hung in her wardrobe, the first real dress she had owned in 2 years. She thought about the turquoise ring that had belonged to Wade's mother, now joined by a wedding band. These physical objects represented so much more than fabric and metal. They represented dignity restored, love freely given, and a future full of hope. The following months were hard work, but it was the kind of work that Delia thrived on. She and Wade worked side by side every day, rebuilding the ranch that her father had loved. They repaired fences, bought new cattle to replace those Constance had sold, and slowly brought the property back to its former glory. Wade was a natural rancher, and his expertise combined with Delia's knowledge of the specific land made them a formidable team. The ranch hands respected Delia not because she was the owner's wife, but because she proved herself capable every single day. She could ride as well as any of them, could rope a calf when needed, and knew the cattle business inside and out. Wade made sure that everyone understood that Delia was an equal partner in all decisions, not just a figurehead. As winter approached, bringing cooler temperatures to New Mexico, Delia discovered she was pregnant. The realization filled her with a complex mixture of joy and fear. She had always wanted children, But the thought of bringing a baby into the world was overwhelming. When she told Wade, he swept her up in his arms and spun her around, his face radiant with happiness. "We are going to be parents," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "Delia, this is the best news. Are you not worried? We have so much to do with the ranch, and a baby will change everything." "A baby will make everything better," Wade corrected. "And yes, it will be challenging, but we will face those challenges together, just like we have faced everything else. You are going to be an amazing mother." Throughout her pregnancy, Wade was attentive and supportive, taking on extra work so that Delia could rest when she needed to. But he never tried to stop her from participating in ranch work entirely, understanding that she needed to feel useful and productive. Instead, he just made sure she did not overdo it, gently steering her toward less strenuous tasks as her belly grew. Mrs. Garcia visited often, helping Delia prepare for the baby and sharing wisdom from her own experiences as a mother. The ranch hands, most of whom had known Delia since she was a child, were excited about the upcoming addition to the Harper Thompson family. They carved a beautiful cradle as a gift, and one of the hands' wives made a set of tiny blankets and clothes. The baby arrived on a warm spring morning in April 1879, less than a year after Wade had first arrived at the ranch. The labor was long and difficult, but when Delia finally held her son in her arms, she forgot all about the pain. He was perfect, with a thick shock of dark hair like his father and eyes that would eventually turn the same warm brown. "What should we name him?" Wade asked, sitting beside Delia on the bed and gazing down at his son with undisguised adoration. "Thomas," Delia said immediately. "Thomas Wade Thompson, after his grandfather and his father, if that is all right with you." Wade's eyes grew suspiciously bright. "That is more than all right. That is perfect." Little Thomas thrived, growing strong and healthy under the watchful eyes of his parents and the entire ranch community. Delia discovered that motherhood came naturally to her, even as she continued to help run the ranch. Wade was a devoted father, spending every spare moment with his son, teaching him about horses and cattle even when the baby was far too young to understand. 2 years later, their daughter arrived, a spirited little girl with Delia's blonde hair and Wade's determined chin. They named her Caroline Mee, after Delia's mother. Caroline was fearless from the start, always trying to keep up with her older brother and getting into everything she could reach. As the children grew, the ranch prospered. Delia's management skills, combined with Wade's experience and hard work, turned the property into one of the most successful operations in the territory. They added more cattle, bought adjoining land when it became available, and built a reputation for honest dealing and quality livestock. But more than the financial success, what mattered most to Delia was the love that filled her home. The ranch house that had once echoed with Constance's cruel words now rang with children's laughter and the warm conversation of a happy family. The room where Delia had slept on a narrow cot, wearing rags and dreaming of escape, had been transformed into a cheerful nursery where her children slept safely and loved. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Wade surprised Delia with a portrait session. A traveling photographer had come through Abiquiu, and Wade had arranged for a formal family photograph. Delia wore a beautiful blue dress that Wade had bought her, along with the turquoise ring that never left her finger. Wade stood behind her chair in his best suit, one hand on her shoulder. Thomas, now 4 years old, stood proudly beside his father, trying to look serious and grown up. And little Caroline, just 2, sat on Delia's lap, grinning at the camera with unbridled joy. When the photograph was developed and framed, Delia hung it in the parlor where everyone could see it. It was a symbol of everything she had fought for, everything she had nearly lost and everything she had gained. A family, a home, a life built on love and mutual respect. "Do you ever think about her?" Wade asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard. "Your stepmother?" "Sometimes," Delia admitted. "I heard she was released from prison last year after serving 3 years for fraud. Part of me wonders where she is now, what she is doing, but mostly I just feel grateful that she is out of my life." "She gave you rags and cruelty," Wade said quietly, "but she also inadvertently gave you something else." "What is that?" "Me. If she had not treated you so terribly, I might have finished the cattle drive and moved on to the next job. I might never have stayed in Abiquiu. But I could not stand by and watch what she was doing to you. So, in a twisted way, her cruelty brought us together." Delia leaned against her husband's shoulder, watching as Thomas helped Caroline climb onto the porch railing. "I suppose that is true. Though I would have preferred a less traumatic way for us to meet." "Agreed. But I will take it, trauma and all, because it led me to you." Wade pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I love you, Delia Thompson. I loved you when you wore rags, and I love you in silk. I loved you when you had nothing, and I love you now that you have everything. My love has never been about what you owned or how you looked. It has always been about who you are." Tears pricked at Delia's eyes, but they were good tears, happy tears. "I know. That is why I love you so much. You saw me when I was invisible to everyone else. You gave me back my dignity before you ever bought me that green dress. The dress was beautiful, and I will treasure it always. But what you really gave me was the courage to believe I deserved better. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." As the sun set over the New Mexico landscape, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Delia reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The pain and suffering of those 2 years under Constance's control had been real and terrible, but they had also taught her strength she did not know she possessed. They had taught her to recognize true kindness when it was offered. And they had led her to Wade, the man who had seen past the rags to the woman underneath. The green dress that Wade had bought her still hung in her wardrobe, carefully preserved. She would pass it down to Caroline someday, along with the story of how a cowboy had seen a girl in rags and decided she deserved better. How he had bought her a dress and a ring, and in doing so, had changed the course of both their lives. But the dress and the ring were just symbols. The real gift Wade had given her was love, partnership, and the unwavering belief that she was worthy of happiness. Together, they had built a life that honored Delia's father's legacy while creating something entirely new. A legacy of love, hard work, and family that would pass down through generations. As Thomas and Caroline ran to their parents for good-night hugs, their faces dirty from play and their eyes bright with joy, Delia knew that this was what true wealth looked like. Not land or cattle or money, though they had those things now. True wealth was measured in love freely given and received, in children who grew up secure and cherished, in a partnership built on trust and respect. Years later, when Delia was an old woman and Wade's hair had turned silver, they would sit on that same porch and watch their grandchildren play in the yard. They would tell the story of how they met, and the grandchildren would gasp at the parts about the wicked stepmother and cheer at the parts where their grandfather rode to the rescue. But what Delia always emphasized, what she wanted them to understand, was that she had saved herself. Wade had helped, had supported and encouraged and stood beside her, but ultimately, Delia had found the courage to fight for what was hers. Wade had not rescued her from a tower like in a fairy tale. He had simply reminded her that she had always had the strength to rescue herself. He had seen her worth when she had almost forgotten it, and he had loved her unconditionally through the process of reclaiming her life. That, Delia would tell her grandchildren, was what true love looked like. Not a knight slaying dragons, but a partner who stood beside you while you slayed your own dragons, ready to hand you a sword if you needed one, but trusting that you were strong enough to wield it yourself. The ranch continued to prosper for decades, eventually passing to Thomas and then to his children. The story of Delia Harper, who wore rags in her own home and was saved by a cowboy with a good heart, became part of the family legend. The green dress was preserved and displayed, a tangible reminder of the moment when everything changed. The turquoise ring was passed down through the female line, each generation adding to the story of how it had sealed a love that changed a family's destiny. And through it all, the values that Delia and Wade had built their life on: hard work, integrity, mutual respect, and unwavering love remained the foundation of everything the family became. In the end, Constance had inadvertently done Delia a favor. By stripping away everything external, by reducing her to rags and raw survival, Constance had forced Delia to discover the strength of her own character. And when Wade came along and offered her a dress and a ring, what he was really offering was a partnership with someone who valued that character above all else. The dress covered her body, and the ring symbolized his commitment, but it was the love behind those gifts that truly transformed her life. It was a love that saw beyond circumstances to the person underneath, a love that offered support without demanding submission, a love that celebrated strength rather than trying to diminish it. On the day Delia died, peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78, she was surrounded by 3 generations of family who loved her. Wade held her hand as she drifted away, his own eyes dim with age but still warm with the love that had never faded. Her last words were simple and true. "I had a good life. I was loved and I loved in return. That is all anyone can ask for." And in the end, that was the real story. Not about a girl who wore rags or a cowboy who bought her a dress, but about 2 people who found each other at exactly the right moment and built something lasting from that chance meeting. A love story written in the dust and sunshine of the New Mexico territory, as real and enduring as the land itself. A story that proved that sometimes the greatest treasures are found not in what we wear or own, but in the people who see us truly and love us completely, rags or silk, rich or poor, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. And even beyond that, in the memories and legacy they leave behind, in the children and grandchildren who carry their story forward, in the values and love that echo through generations. That was the true happy ending, the one that mattered most. Not a moment frozen in time, but a lifetime of moments, each one built on the foundation of that first gift: a green dress, a turquoise ring, and a love that saw beyond appearances to the truth underneath.